To draft the lining pattern, we will place tracing paper on top of the tote bag shell pattern to work from it. Tape to keep the tracing paper in place. This will make drafting the lining pattern much quicker and simpler. The lining is below the top edge of the tote bag, so we need to measure this distance. It is 7 centimeters. Measure 7 centimeters down from this point at the top hemline and mark. Then repeat on this side. Connect the marks. Now we copy the outer lines from the shell pattern below this line. Next, we need to indicate these bottom corners for our lining as well. Copy these two lines where they cross at C. Then these two where they cross at D. The seam line at the top of the lining will have a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Extend the line if needed. Measure 1.5 centimeters from this point and mark. Repeat on this side as well. Measure 1.5 centimeters up and mark. We connect the marks. This is the top of the lining pattern, and this is the bottom. We remove the lining pattern from the shell pattern to continue. If the lining inside the shell of the tote bag is exactly the same size as the shell, it will not sit flat inside the tote bag. It will bulge out away from the shell and not lay flat. To make sure it does lay flat inside the tote bag and look neat, we need to make the lining pattern a bit smaller. To do this, we will reduce the size of the lining pattern from the sides and the bottom by about 5 millimeters. Measure 5 millimeters inwards from here along this line and mark. Then here on the bottom. We use a different color to make the new line stand out, since this will be the seam allowance line on this side. Measure 5 millimeters inwards on this side and mark. Then here along the bottom line. Connect the marks. We cross out the previous seam allowance lines we copied from the shell pattern. Then here on this side. On the bottom, we also measure up 5 millimeters from this line and mark. Then here on this side. We cross out the previous fold line we copied from the shell as well. As you can see, inside the tote bag, the lining does not have a seam line here at the bottom. To indicate the fold line, we draw a line here parallel to the new bottom line. Because we don't have a seam line here in the middle of the bottom side of the bag. Then draw two straight lines on either side. Indicate the fold line with arrows and then label it. This is the finished lining pattern. Next, we will add seam allowances to the cut line of the tote bag pattern.